Not a single person alive who paid taxes to the UK government saw their pounds that they paid go into the NHS to pay for something. That's not how it works. This is a government-created service. Government creates the money to fund it. And Parliament chose to take it away from you, slowly, piece by piece. And the best way to convince you to accept the loss of a wonderful healthcare system is to do it slowly so that it appears that it's not working anymore.
This is the MMT Podcast with Patricia and Christian Riley. Hi, I'm Christian Riley and welcome to the Modern Monetary Theory Podcast. You can find us on Twitter at MMT Podcast, and you can support the show by going to patreon.com/MMT Podcast. For as little as $1 a month, you can get early access to our episodes and, starting really soon, access to patron-only episodes where we research and answer your specific questions. A big thank you to all our supporters so far. It really helps keep the show going, and it will improve it over the long term. And thanks for all your positive feedback on social media and emails. It's a real shot in the arm for all of us. At the beginning there, you heard our guest this week, Economist Ellis Winningham, saying something that might come as quite a shock if you're not familiar with MMT. He said that the pounds you've been paying in taxes to the government are not taken in and spent out again on, say, the NHS, because that's not how it works macroeconomically. And that's because the UK government is the monopoly issuer of pounds. So every time it needs to hire a nurse or a doctor or an IT worker, the government instructs the bank that it owns, the Bank of England, to credit the bank accounts necessary to build that hospital or hire that nurse. The Bank of England uses a computer to mark up the balances on the appropriate bank accounts. That's where the pounds for the NHS come from a computer keyboard. Now that's very hard for some people to hear, but that's the way it works, and it doesn't mean that taxation is not important. The need to pay taxes drives the government's currency, in that everybody has to pay taxes in pounds, so that when you work for money, you have to make sure that at least some of that money is in pounds. You could work for Bitcoin or gold or seashells, but you will have to convert at least some of those earnings into pounds in order to settle your obligation to the state. In other words, your tax bill. And that's why most of us don't work for other money things apart from our state's designated unit of account. If you're offered work in a wage denominated in something else, you tend to calculate what that sum equates to in dollars or pounds or yen, depending which country you pay taxes in order to figure out whether the job is worth your time. So people who understand MMT say tax the rich for social equity purposes, but not because we need the money to spend on the NHS. Because, and this is the good news, the money for the NHS is created when the government passes a budget and authorises the spending. No need to turn a billionaire upside down, hold them by the ankles and shake out his pockets for money for the NHS. I mean, do it because it's a fun thing to do and you need the exercise, and he'll threaten to leave the country, making the country a better place, but not to pay for the NHS. Why is the NHS being underfunded? Because not enough people know how modern money systems work. So, how do you argue for the NHS or a Green New Deal or Medicare for all in the face of the how are you going to pay for it crowd? By understanding macroeconomic reality. And that's where we come in. If you're having trouble digesting what I've just said, I'd urge you to listen to our early episodes and ask questions. Because, unfortunately, people can imagine the end of the world easier than they can imagine the end of mainstream economics. So you have to do the imagining for them. It's sad, but it would seem that we have to argue the economics of saving the planet rather than just saving the planet. In this episode, Ellis Winningham talks about these things and addresses some of the easy rhetorical mistakes people can make on the way to fully understanding MMT. So a couple of things. At one point, Ellis mentions IDS. Now, for our non-UK listeners, that's Ian Duncan Smith, who is by today's standards an almost quaintly evil, pro-austerity British MP. In April 2013, in response to a benefit claimant telling the BBC that his life was hard because he only had £53 a week to live on, Ian Duncan Smith confidently claimed that he, Ian Duncan Smith, could live on £53 a week. But weirdly, he never volunteered to reduce his wages to £53 a week, which is odd given that in the very same month, he became so worried about public finances, he asked pensioners to return their winter fuel payments to help relieve the government's economic burden. Just on the surface of it, that story's nearly funny, but in order to laugh, you have to put to one side that a recent study showed that 3,000 Britons have died each year for the last 5 years because they couldn't afford to heat their homes. And then when you add to that the government doesn't need to take money off anyone in order to spend, least of all the people who need it the most, you can see the high stakes of continuing to misunderstand the money system. Second point, Ellis also mentions demand leakage. Now, as I understand it, in this context, demand is all the pounds moving around in the private sector. Your spending is someone else's income, and their spending is someone else's income. Your income is someone else's spending, and on and on. Demand leakage, in the context of this conversation, is when you put some of your money aside in, say, a savings account. That money is no longer buying goods and services in the economy. And it can get confusing because economists call all the pounds held by the private sector, you, me, all the firms, they call that money private sector savings, whether they're in a savings account or a current account. So to be clear, the pounds spent into existence by the government that remain in the system after taxation are called private sector savings. And your money that you put in a savings account and lock away for a rainy day, they're part of what gets called demand leakage. So we start this episode talking to Ellis about the MMT job guarantee. In a context where a population understands the money system and plans to run its economy at full capacity, say to stop the planet burning up and the extinction of human life as we know it, it becomes important to stabilise the price of money. So in Australia, when wool is overproduced to the point where its market price starts dipping below a certain figure, the government puts a floor under it by buying wool at a fixed price and putting it aside for later. When the wool gets scarce and its price goes over a certain amount, the government sells the wool back into the market, again at a fixed price, to stabilise the price of wool. As economist Bill Mitchell puts it, and this is a paraphrase, the government is making sure that 100% of wool is fully employed. It should at least do the same for people. The MMT job guarantee is a system where the government offers a job to anyone who is willing and able to work but can't find work. At a fixed price, a dignified wage, it puts a floor under the price of labour, so the private sector can hire people out of that pool of job guarantee workers when the economy picks up again. So for more on this, here's Ellis.
The job guarantee causes, and this is where I think a lot of these, and I'm going to say it now, Patricia, these Blairites know that they're all about, well, that deficit needs to be reduced. We don't like that. And, the market's a precious thing. We need to let the market decide, blah, blah, blah. Compassion, but still the market. Well, here's a thing that should be appealing to them. What's appealing about the job guarantee is that it lets what we call endogenous activity determine the size of the government's deficit. Isn't that interesting? What we're talking about is we're letting our private sector activity determine how big or how small the UK government deficit should be, automatically. And that works really simple, by the government buying up all this labour and then employing it in the local communities to do good things. Okay? And it creates this little pool, a little buffer stock there. And these workers can be hired by the private sector out of that pool. Okay? And these workers can transfer back and forth. In good times, they leave the pool. And in downturns, they enter the pool. When the business cycle comes crashing down, you get a little bit of a recession going on, you got a downturn here, people lose their jobs. Well, they have somewhere to go. So they head for the job guarantee. All right? Well, when that happens, the government's deficit expands automatically. It grows. It gets larger because there are more workers the government has to pay now. But in good times, when there's an economic expansion, these workers will be hired by the private sector out of that job guarantee. And the pool will get smaller. Well, since there's less workers for the government to pay, the deficit itself begins to drop automatically. Seems like that would be more appealing than allowing politicians and Parliament to determine what level of deficit spending should be to maintain full employment at all times. Mm-hmm. This is allowing the private sector to make that decision. Remember, the private sector knows best? Well, let's give it a shot and see if it does. But, no. In this case, no, it doesn't know best. That's what you start hearing sometimes. Who am I confusing? I'm confusing the Blairites? Look, he's already confused.
More than you already are.
So don't make me do that video again. I never want to do that again.
We'll have it at the end.
That's my final word on Blairites.
Okay.
Right?
Sure it is.
Party squatters. Blairites party squatters. Occupy Labour.
Yep. We're fully behind that, Alice. We're fully behind that. So, just looking at some of your recent posts, Ellis, I was thinking we should move on to some, I'm going to call them well-meaning mistakes. Let's call them innocent frauds that MMT advocates might make when they're out there advocating. And maybe this will be a quick fire round, maybe not. But we can let's address some of these statements that you brought up, because you're saying that you spend quite a bit of time just trying to put people straight on a few wrong-headed notions. So I'll go through them, and let's start with this one because it kind of connects to what we were just talking about. You can couple a job guarantee with a UBI. True or false, Ellis?
You can't. It's false. The reason why is the U in the BI, the universal nature. Everybody gets it. Okay, well, no, you can't do that because the job guarantee itself is universal. It's a job that's available to anyone who's willing and able to work, and they will be paid a base fixed wage. All right, you can't just then throw a UBI at people too on top of that. Everybody gets it, including IDS.
Oh no!
No, we're not. No, we can't. You can't have that. And David Cameron up there getting his, and Theresa May getting her little, bit of it. No, you can't have that because eventually it'll be inflationary.
But
what you?
Sorry,
yeah, go ahead.
This causes a little bit of confusion because in the Green New Deal, as in the US at the moment, there is a BI. And people sometimes confuse it for a UBI. Can you explain the difference? Right.
A basic income. What we put on the table, what I guess, the package deal, at least the one that Geneva was talking about, and the one that we were all arguing about several years ago, was whether or not the job guarantee should be coupled with some sort of basic income scheme. And the idea is you can package them together. But the basic income can't be universal. It has to target a specific cohort. In other words, it has to target a specific group of people who will be receiving it. Okay, so it's not universal. But a lot of times people take the UBI and a BI, which we call a basic income guarantee, and they conflate the two. And they say, it's the same thing. No, it's not. Universal means IDS gets it. Basic income means IDS can, piss off. He isn't getting anything. He's got enough. He's not getting any more. If it were up to me, he'd have a lot less. So don't let me come there and become a member of Parliament. That man deserves less. And I'll take it from him too, and I'll destroy it. The basic difference here is that a basic income guarantee is targeted at a specific cohort. And in the case of the job guarantee, what we're talking about are people who cannot work through, whether it be disability or elderly, the elderly, or whether they don't want to work. Right? They say, well, I refuse to work. Okay. Well, when we talk about refuse to work, that's where we got to make we have to draw a line somewhere, and it has to be based on income, based on, for instance, like I said, IDS. Let's just say he's just retired and he's got £5 million, all right, in his bank, and he's sitting in his nice little mansion with his half bald head, watching the telly, watching the BBC. You cannot make the claim that he's not willing to work. Okay, he's got to be excluded. That's not what we mean. What we mean is it's people at the bottom income distribution, people who are the unskilled. They say, well, we refuse to work. In other words, the people whom the job guarantee is created for, the bottom income distribution, the unskilled worker, the worker that is the most disadvantaged, the worker who always suffers first in a recession and always benefits last in an expansion. That's who we're talking about. Those people there are who the BI would be targeted at. And if they don't want to take a job in the job guarantee, they would receive a basic income payment, but it would be less generous than the base wage of the job guarantee. But keep in mind, we also intend to strengthen currently existing social welfare nets. Mm-hmm. So, we strengthen those. So that's in combination of that. So basically, will all of your basic needs be taken care of? The basic ones. Yeah, they'll be taken care of. But if you want the new car, or you want to go to, say the cinema, or, you want to take a vacation or whatnot, or you want a new Xbox, work a couple hours a week in a job guarantee.
And then, the other thing that concerns me is that the UBI advocates, generally, not all of them, but many do, at least the big players, advocate it as a replacement for all kind of benefits.
No, that's a problem. That's a problem.
So you would put the unemployed next to the disabled and next to, people who, those who aren't able to work alongside those who cannot find a job and... etc. And you make them all equal in a way. And you can't say somebody who's disabled has, they have more expenses, they have more economic needs possibly than those who are just unemployed. So that's a big worry for me.
Right. Well, you see, the disabled here in this case will get the basic income payment. Okay, they qualify for that instantly, but they would also get strengthened disability payments on top of that, and plus the food allowances and all that, and the NHS would be properly funded so they wouldn't have to worry about the health care. Sorry to get a little bit irritated. I've got loud there for a reason. This really bothers me. But all this would be strengthened and put to right, and the disabled would be taken care of. And on top of that, if they're severely disabled or even mildly disabled, the job guarantee will have people working in it whose job is to go out and make their lives, disabled lives, more productive, more meaningful. To care for them and help them become more socially included, and not feel ostracized.
Yeah, so the job guarantee at the same time should offer work which is suitable for disabled people to do. And at the same time, I think those who are who have mental disabilities or not mental disabilities, but emotional kind of illnesses and mental illnesses.
PTSD, anxiety,
and depression,
sort of thing. Yes, and depression.
People who suffer from depression, they tend to be very different in terms of what they need to recover, and some people can be so debilitated that they just cannot work and they should not be made to work. But there are some who believe or who feel that actually going to work helps them.
Sure.
So
it's a choice, isn't it?
I think the option of having a job at your discretion and that you perform willingly, it can actually contribute a lot to mental health in general. Exactly.
Yeah, I'm glad you got kind of passionate about the NHS there back then, because I think what's happening in this country at the moment, or it's been going on for a while now, that people are losing the memory of what it was like when it was good. They're starting to go, they're starting to lose the desire to demand that back, because people who can remember it aren't speaking up.
They're starting to accept the government narrative,
and they're starting to go, well, in Europe it's kind of like partially privatized and that works, and it's like it's like, well, why are you imagining what it's like somewhere else when it was really good here in your living memory? Why, let's get that back. What can we say about it apart from it's being deliberately underfunded? And, when you're an MMT, you're like, it's being deliberately underfunded.
There's two takes that I have on this. I'm very passionate about the NHS because the NHS is the world standard for how healthcare should be in all nations. all advanced nations.
It is, isn't it? It's wonderful.
Okay, I'm sorry to inform people who disagree, but it is. This is how healthcare should be run and conducted. All right.
Even
now, this is
years of being debilitated is still wonderful.
Yes. This is a system. Okay, that has been around since after World War II, shortly after World War II, and it's just fine up until recent. Why? Okay, it's bunk. What you see, and the people of Britain need to understand this. They need to grasp this concept very, very well in their heads. They've got to get it through their heads. The only reason why the NHS seemed to have become inefficient, the only reason why the NHS seemed as though it wasn't working and people were waiting and things were going wrong, is because it was underfunded deliberately. This was a political choice by Parliament. Not a single person alive in the United Kingdom who paid taxes to the UK government saw their pounds that they paid go into the NHS to pay for something. That's not how it works at all. This is a government-created service. Government creates the money to fund it. And Parliament chose to take it away from you, slowly, piece by piece. And the best way to convince you to accept the loss of a wonderful healthcare system is to do it slowly so that it appears that it's not working anymore. Then you've got American politicians pointing at it saying, well, if you look over there at the Britain, that's how they say it, look over there at the Britain, and you see them, oh, you see King George over there trying to run his socialized medicine. Well, let me tell you, look at how people are waiting in line dying of brain cancer, waiting 9 years to get surgery. It ain't working over there, and that's government-run healthcare for you. It don't work.
Right. That's Britain under that Sharia law.
Yeah, that's what it is. Woohoo! I'm going to tell you, give me a Bud Light. So anyway, they point at the NHS and they say, look, it's not working. Look, it's not working. It's inefficient. It's badly run. The reason why it's inefficient is because politicians choose to defund it. Let me make this clear to the people of Britain, anyone listening to this podcast. I want you to think about ASDA. Just for a moment, ASDA. You got it in your mind, ASDA. Okay. Now, let's imagine for just a moment. Yeah, just get it in your mind there, the green and everything, all right? Now, what we do is we deliberately, as consumers, begin underfunding ASDA by not shopping there. All right? We're just going to deliberately do this. What's going to happen to the shelves? They're going to go empty. What's going to happen to customer service there for people who still go there? Long lines. You're going to have workers with attitudes. It's all going to be badly run. It's very inefficient. And eventually, it won't function properly. Okay, everybody knows this. Well, that's what happened with the NHS. When you underfund it, things go wrong. It becomes inefficient. Huh? But how long ago was it? It wasn't just 20 years ago. They used to give doctors, they give GPs incentives, financial incentives, if they get more of their patients stopping smoking and getting the blood pressure down. What a wonderful system. What a wonderful system that if you could not afford a way home, you could go to the cashier and they give you money to get home, give you a ride. What a wonderful system. Why would you want to allow a bunch of free market miscreants to trash it and turn it into an Americanized version of healthcare? Let me tell you about America. Right? For those of you who haven't lived in America and experienced what healthcare is like in America, don't get sick because you might die. That's not a joke. You've got two choices in America. You develop a heart condition, not through any fault of yours, just genetic. Well, you got a choice here. You can pay $300 a month and have a $6,000 deductible, which means you got to pay $6,000 out of your pocket before the insurance will even pay for anything. The surgery, parts of it might not be covered. The insurance company gets to determine whether or not you get the surgery, not the doctor. So if you get sick, you might die because you can't afford to treat the disease that's afflicted you. And if you do manage to find a way to convince them, I'll just go ahead and get it done. I don't have the money, but I'll do it anyway. And you engage in that and you get your surgery done, you'll be bankrupt trying to pay off the debt. Hounded by creditors day and night. Your teeth will fall out of your mouth.
I'm guessing that's not good for your heart as well. If you have a heart condition, that kind of stress alone can kill you.
No. America, they portray it as one of the best healthcare. Yeah, there's so much spending on healthcare in America. Yet, look at the state of Americans. The life expectancy is nowhere near that of people in France. Nowhere near that of people in Great Britain back in the day when the NHS was functioning properly. All right? And now what do we see here? Well, we see a bunch of US insurance companies coming in to snap up the little pieces of the NHS that are being cordoned off and sold away. That's what you want. You want to be paying money to an insurance company who will determine whether or not you qualify for treatment, whether or not it will pay for it, or you got to pay for it out of pocket. Is that what you want? Really? You want the United Kingdom to become America's 51st state. Wonderful. None of that tat. It's disgusting. You need your dignity back. There are people in Parliament right now that are taking your dignity away. They're selling your birthright away to a bunch of rich people who want to profit off of your misery.
Yeah.
And you need to take your NHS back.
Yeah.
You're going to take it back. It's going to be fully funded. And that's what we intend to do. And I'm not giving up until it's over. And it's over for me when it's fully funded and functioning the way it was, plus enhanced.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've still got this situation. I mean, at the moment, I'm paying, and again, I don't have it the worst, but, even the little things like prescription charges, they're in the order of like £10 or something. And I have a repeat prescription for medicine, and I'm about to get my first pair of glasses and stuff. When you add all that in, that's going to cost me like, that's going to cost me like maybe £300 this year if I go for the cheapest glasses and get my regular medicine. And now when you aggregate that out to the whole economy, that's a lot of pounds being sucked up out of the economy for no reason, really. Yeah,
which you could be spending for what? You could be spending for food. You could be spending for something else.
Yeah.
Okay.
And like I say, it's, and now some people will go, yeah, but if you can afford it, then you should pay it because there are people who can't and they'll get assistance. But I'm like, no, I think, that's the way they're trying to sort of erode it so that people will start talking about affordability and then demanding better quote unquote value for money. And then we get, then we see the gouging start to happen.
The costing thing.
Yeah,
Is it costed? Yeah, no. You see, through the lens of MMT, which is the correct lens, by the way, it's reality. Not a single one of you, like I said, you don't pay for the NHS. The government does this.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about Christian needing a $300 pair of glasses, what's happening? Well, I'll tell you what. This guy over here living in Manchester, his taxes are not paying for Christian's glasses. It's not the way it works. It's not the way it works. The government pays. He said, well, the government taxpayer money. No, it's not. The government goes to a keyboard and types a number, and that money exists. That's the way the system works. That's the way it works. It's nobody's tax money. Nobody's. It doesn't work that way.
I guess it helps.
The spending,
them justify kind of on the left, at least, they believe it helps them justify the taxing of the rich. But our case...
Yeah, but I can justify the taxing of the rich, and so can you, and so can Christian, by standing up there and telling someone, you're too bloody rich. Right? Can't I?
Yeah, but not just that. But, if you tell them that the rich are funding Christian's glasses, then, how do you then say, when you say to Christian, I think we need to stop these rich people earning so much in the first place? He'll be like,
exactly.
No, he's paying for my classes.
No.
Need him to earn a lot.
Alan Sugar, please come back. Don't leave the country now that Jeremy Corbyn's Prime Minister. Come back because we need your taxes to pay for everything. Please come back.
Let him flee.
Exactly.
Let him flee the country.
Put him on a plane.
Yeah, bye now. Yeah. Bye now. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Grandpa. Get out, all right?
In that spirit,
you're all proud of it.
Can you explain perhaps why capital flight is not applicable to us?
Capital flight does not apply because the majority of capital, is what we call in situ. That means that it's fixed. We're talking about factories. We're talking about all this stuff, all these things that are fixed, real estate and what have you. This is difficult investment to just pick up and abandon. All right? But let's assume that a company wants to be stupid and abandon it. There's nothing stopping the UK government from seizing those resources and deploying them for the public purpose. Furthermore, in the spirit of the great free market and competition, healthy competition, if you want to flee Britain, there are plenty of people waiting in line to pick up what you left behind.
Yes.
It's called competition. Remember? Oh, forgot about that. It doesn't apply here. Oh, yes, it does. See, now you're going to have speculative investment fleas. That may cause a problem here and there, but on the whole, this is nothing that the UK government, which happens to be the sovereign currency issuer, can handle. It's nothing it can't handle. It just changes a policy directive. We'll go this way. This is our new social agenda. We're going over here. And guess what? It no longer matters. Cleans it up.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's Moseley's law, isn't it? There is no financial crisis so deep, appropriate fiscal adjustment can't fix it.
Exactly. Right. So you might get speculators fleeing, but why wouldn't you want that?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you want that? Why would you not rather have productive investment and capital formation going on? Productive investment means that people would have good-paying, dignified jobs producing something that matters. Why do you want people just coming in and investing for the sake of earning more pounds? What does that do? Speculation doesn't do nothing. Gambling adds nothing, adds no value to the economy whatsoever.
Alan Sugar, if you're hearing this, there's plenty of Alan Sugars waiting to take you.
Hey, look, over in the US, I'll give you an example. Over in the US, all right, you walk on Wall Street and they got food commodity speculation, a futures market. And the idea of the futures market is a guy comes in and he invests his money. And the idea is that in the future, when he's invested at a certain date, when that date arrives, he's supposed to take delivery. The investor's supposed to take delivery of the food from the farmer. That's the whole idea, right? Well, speculators that come in, they don't take delivery. They just take the profits and run. What they do is they invest, they speculate, and they drive the price of food up. They make the profit and then they run. Okay? Now, this drives up the price domestically for certain foodstuffs. But you know what this does to developing nations that can't really produce their own food supply? They depend on imports for food. It increases hunger, and poverty just makes it worse. And Goldman Sachs has an index, for Christ's sake, for this kind of behavior. This stuff should be outlawed. Speculative behavior, in the majority of cases, speculative behavior is useless, and it should be banned. It has no purpose whatsoever. It does nothing for nobody, except the person speculating. So let's be clear. Our idea, in the end, is we have dignity through sustainable production. Okay? We want to bring back a production-based economy and make it function properly, but we want to do it in a sustainable way. And that's going to provide dignity to human beings. That's the idea. And we're going to get there come hell or high water. The age of neoliberalism is dying. It's dying. The beast is bleeding out. And we're letting it bleed out because it's funny to watch. I'm that mean about it because look at the 50 years of damage neoliberalism has caused. Look at the 7 years of austerity and the ongoing austerity in the UK.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
How about declaring people that are terminally ill months away from death fit for work?
Oh.
What kind of a nation does that to its own people?
Yeah.
You declare war on your own people? The government is who I'm talking about. You see, the government declaring war on its own people? That's disgusting. That's neoliberalism for you. Grenfell Towers is another example. It's disgusting.
And there was a study that came out this year that said that there were 120,000 deaths linked to austerity measures.
Yes.
I think that's an understatement.
And, well, you know...
It is an understatement. I'll bet you anything it's an understatement.
But the pushback that study is getting is akin to the pushback that, remember when the Lancet in the early 2000s after the Iraq invasion, their early report on the death toll there was like, they put the civilian death toll at 100,000 again. And, you know, the mainstream were up in arms. It just sounds too high. You know, like, so you've got these scholars on one side that have put a report together, and then you've got these people with emotions on the other side who just emotionally think, no, it sounds too high. You know, I mean,
they're either in denial or they
exactly.
just don't care.
Yeah. You know,
Or a mixture of both.
We're in a bad time at the moment over here.
Yeah, and that's I've been an advocate now. I think you might have remembered, if you were following me back in the general election in 2017.
Right.
I was on the phone constantly, and I was out in my pajamas. You know, on the phone, out in the sun there, going, come on, Labour. Yeah,
That was fun. That was great.
Yeah, I was trying desperately to get people, the MMT community that's so US centric. Would you please invade the UK?
Yeah.
I was up in arms. I was yelling at people, saying, now is the time. We need a mass invasion of the UK. Do it now, do it. And, you know, it's like, well, let's focus on the US a little bit more. That's one of my concerns, is that there is barely an MMT presence in the UK.
Bill's been really good to us over the last few years. Bill Mitchell.
Yes, he has.
Keeps popping over, and last time he brought Warren with him. So Warren would say, no, I've just hijacked this. It's Bill's gig, but I've hijacked it.
It feels generally like the community between US and here is very tight, very close, and Bill obviously keeps the Australian contingent as well, close to the UK. Yeah. Very much so.
And it was good. Yeah, Stephen came over. Stephen Hale came over. We got a couple of weeks of Steve.
But I've learned a lot about US politics as a result of that. And I think the US activists have learned a lot about Europe and the UK in general as well.
Yeah, and that's what I started that. I went to Real Progressives, and I told Steve, I said, you know, you're going to have to up your game and go international. I want you to talk to Stephen Hale. You know, I want Americans to hear the Australian and the UK perspective of how America is viewed from the outside. So they can hear about how American insurance companies and corporations are spreading into their nations and destroying their social safety nets. Because you know why? And I've said this before, very publicly too. I have said that once you understand the basics of MMT, the moment that light bulb is on in your head, you are responsible for everyone in the world. Yeah. Why? Because you know the truth. And if you know the truth, how can you stand by and watch the people in Greece suffer? How can you stand by and watch what happened in the UK and not say anything? You know how to fix it. So now it's your responsibility to go forth. All right? And that's the point. It's got to be, at some point there's an international thing that has to take place. Mm-hmm. We have to stop becoming UK citizens and US citizens and Australian citizens and become citizens of the world. Because neoliberalism is a worldwide phenomenon. Now, I'm not saying, at any point am I saying that as far as currency issuance goes, it should be international as well. I'm not saying that, because that's definitely a national issue. All right? But what I am saying is, as far as fighting neoliberalism, we've got to have a community of people who don't know borders. everyone is a concern, no matter where you are. Right now, I'm a citizen of Greece. I'm a citizen of the UK. I'm a citizen of Canada, a citizen of the US, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and anywhere else they need my help.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't even really touched on, climate disruption and stuff.
Yeah, I mean that concerns us all, doesn't it?
But it's the same thing. What we've been saying, the same rules apply. There's one planet. Understanding
MMT as well gives you great understanding of the relationship between countries and the structures of power between countries. And of course, I'm looking at the US first of all, but in Europe as well, and colonialism in general, and historical and present, and it's it just gives you a really wide understanding of like the big picture.
Let's get back to Ellis's list of things that he has to correct on the internet.
Oh, okay.
And
that could be a whole podcast series. By the way,
I'm gonna run through the next one on the list. Okay. The limit to government deficit spending is the amount of real resources of the nation. True or false?
Okay, that's false. And a lot of people would be stunned. A lot of neophytes, beginners would go, "Oh, that's not why." The reason why, and it's not a trick question either, it's a very important thing to understand. It's a nuance that must be understood, especially by beginners. Because if you get it early and nip it in the bud, it won't be a problem later on, okay? The thing is it's not the amount of real resources of the nation, but what real resources are available to the nation. You see, it's not just what the nation itself possesses, but what it can also acquire through imports. And I hate to mention it, but it's still a fact. If the military sallies forth and occupies a nation, those are the real resources. It takes them. Okay, I'm just being realistic. I'm not saying I advocate for that.
That explains colonialism, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I was going to make the point. You look back at Britain when it had the American colonies. Well, that added to the wealth of Britain because of the real resources. The wood, the copper, the gold, silver, whatever else could be found was shipped back to Britain. You see, it increased the wealth of Britain. So the American colonies basically just increased Britain's access to real resources. See, that's what I'm saying. So you can't just say it's just of the nation, but what can also be acquired through imports, occupation, or immigration, as a matter of fact. Perfect example. Let's say that you don't have enough doctors for the new NHS that we've now fully funded. Well, that means we've got to fully fund education, and we're going to have to provide incentives to smart kids to consider medical school, right? Or to consider becoming nurses or what have you, or researchers.
Rather than the financial sector.
Right. So basically,
immigration is an import, basically. So
yeah, it's an import.
I'm an imported engineer.
It's actually a fact. I mean, what it is that if you just don't have the labor force for a certain sector, okay, and Britain has enough resources, to affect production in that sector. Well, what if it needs more labor power? They say, well, there's a fixed one there. That's fixed. No, it's not fixed. Britain could stand up and scream out to the world, hey, come live and work in Britain. No restrictions. You don't have to prove that you can do a job uniquely that most Brits can't do. No. Just come on over here. We'll provide you incentives. Come work. Next thing you know, you're going to see all these people coming. Guess what that is? You're increasing your labor supply. There you go. Your real resources going up. You're importing workers into your system. Right? So the limit is what the national government can access. When all of that has been maximized, there's a point we call macroeconomic efficiency, where full employment is affected. All real resources, none are laying idle. They're all deployed doing something. Okay, that is the limit of deficit spending. You have to stop there, because if you persistently exceed that point, you're going to get inflationary pressures rising from the spending. Okay, so it's like I said, it's a nuance that must be understood. Not of the nation, but available to the nation.
Great. Okay, right, here's the second one. Money creation can be inflationary if it exceeds the real production capacity of the domestic economy.
They can't. Money in itself is not inflationary. Money creation is not inflationary at all. Okay, that's a monetarist line. Needs to be put aside. Okay, the truth is spending is what provides the risk. It's spending. Okay, and people say, well, if the government increases the net money supply, wouldn't that increase spending? Not necessarily. What if that increased net money supply, okay, did not meet the private sector's desire to net save? Well, then the private sector is not going to increase its spending. It'll still remain stagnant. Okay, there's a thing called savings, demand leakages. All right? When you pump more money into the economy, people could save it. It doesn't necessarily translate into more spending. Okay, spending is the key that we're looking at. Spending is what has the inflation risk. Okay, that's the inflation vector. That's the infection vector right there, is the spending. Okay, so this spending can be public, as in UK government spending. It could be private spending, you and I doing the spending, or a combination of both. It doesn't really matter. That's where the inflation risk is. So money is a stock. It doesn't do anything. It just sits there. So it's not inflationary. Money supply is not inflationary. It's the spending that's at issue. And we got to remember that. It's always got to be remembered that it's the spending that carries the inflation risk.
Okay, so the next one is, inflation is too much money chasing too few goods.
Now, that's Milton Friedman spitting out a bunch of nonsense at people, telling people once again that money can be inflationary. It's spending. Okay, it's not chasing too few goods. And that's just one aspect on top of that. All right? Money has nothing to do with it. It's spending. It's the spending that's going on. It's too much spending exceeding production capacity at some level. And like you talked about bottlenecks earlier, if we were to pump prime the economy, you're going to get bottlenecks in sectors. Not every sector will keep rising at the same pace with output. Some are going to bottleneck before others, and that's going to cause inflationary pressures to rise.
Ellis, would you mind, sorry to interrupt, would you mind just defining a labour bottleneck for us? Because we've talked about it, and I'm just thinking maybe some people don't know what that is.
Very simply put, a bottleneck is where a particular supply chain is trying to produce. Yeah, it's creating outputs, producing goods or producing services, right? And it reaches a point where it can no longer increase that production, all right? And it gets stuck in a bottleneck, and it gets trapped, and it can't produce any further. Okay, various sectors bottleneck faster than others, all right? And one of them could bottleneck, one of them could constrict faster, and that would be a spin-off that would in turn cause costs to rise in another sector, and you'd end up with bottlenecks springing up. It's sort of like a domino effect. Okay, and in the process, the price level would begin to rise. You know, of course, the job guarantee can guard against this and takes care of that problem, but that's a separate issue. The point being is that spending itself is what carries the inflation risk, like I said. So there's too much money chasing too few goods. So it's too much spending beyond the production capacity of the nation. But that's also one type of inflation. That's demand pull. And demand pull isn't anything that anybody has seen. I mean, Mosley's been alive he mentioned it first, and he said Mosley's been alive for 60-some years. I'm 52 in August, and I'm telling you it hasn't happened since I've been alive. This type of inflation it's rare, okay, in the US, UK, Australia. But, a cost push scenario where a deliberately shorted supply of like oil, which is one particular product, or one particular good that affects a whole range of goods, okay, can cause inflationary pressures to rise if it's restricted. Okay, that's more likely to happen. But in this case, Friedman's little thing about money, that's the problem. It's not money. He wants people to fear money. And then he'll show you pictures of the printing press spitting dollar bills a pound that's going by really fast.
Wheelbarrows full of money.
Yeah, that wild, really fast printing press going by is a visual image of accelerating inflation, you see. It's terrorized the audience.
It's propaganda.
That's exactly what it is. Goebbels would appreciate Friedman. Ooh, I said it too, and I'm not apologizing.
We're nearly at the 2-hour mark, and we've only just gone full Godwin. So we did
well. We did
pretty well, actually, given that this is the internet. All right, here's the next one. Inflation is when the price level keeps going up.
No. Okay, no. Inflation, properly defined, inflation is the continuous rise in the price level of goods and services over a period of time that price rise is observed. In other words, you can't know that inflation exists unless you're looking for it. You got to actually look for it. So to do that, you've got to create a time frame and then dedicate yourself to observing throughout that time frame to examine the price rise and see if an inflationary episode is occurring. It's the only way you're going to know. Okay, so that's how you define inflation there in general terms. It's not just because the price level keeps going up. How do you know it's going up? You have to be looking for it. You can't tell it's going up. It's something that you have to be looking for, and you have to have a time frame. Okay, and you have to have a window. And when you have that window and you're examining it, then you can declare an inflationary episode. For instance, you could look at it for 3 months through June, July, and August, and you'll notice that the inflation rate in July is 2%, or in June is 2%, July 2%, August 2%. What would you say? Well, you'd say that's sort of a stable rate of inflation there. Okay, so there you got that. Now, let's say you look in June and you see 3%, and in July you see 4%, and in August you see 6%. Okay, what's going on here? Well, obviously it's accelerating. So you have an accelerating inflation episode. See, that's how it works. You have to be looking for it so you can measure it. And that measurement will be expressed in a percentage.
Okay. And I think you're going to like the next one, actually, because I've seen you say a lot about this. An example of inflation is when the price of eggs or a loaf of bread goes up.
Oh, the loaf of bread people. The loaf of bread people. Yeah. No, when the price of a single item goes up, that is not inflation. It's just not inflation. Inflation is the entire price level of all goods and services going up. Okay, the loaf of bread,
or a
people.
Pint of milk here as well.
Oh yeah. Inflation. We're all going to die. No,
I can't believe nobody's brought up Marmite Gate. It was terrible. Walking around with wheelbarrows full of cash just for a jar of Marmite. You could no. You see, when a price of a single good or service or a couple of them go up, that's not inflation. Okay, that's just not inflation. That's not what inflation is. And my problem with the loaf of bread people is they try to employ nostalgia. They think nostalgia. Yeah. The price of a loaf of bread in 1952, people. And they're very common in the U.S. And basically what they want to do is they want you to look at the price of a loaf of bread in 1952, compare it to today, and they say that provides profound insight into the reason why the cost of living is so high. I don't know how nostalgia applies to macroeconomics, but apparently they do. And it was so annoying because they say, well, what was the wage in 1952 compared to today? Okay, so what you're saying is you want the loaf of bread to be priced in 1952 prices, but you want to keep your $50,000 a year salary. Oh, I see. Not happening. It doesn't work that way. Right? So they're ignoring wages completely. They're also ignoring the fact that the real wage itself, which they probably don't even know what that is, the real wage has been out of line with productivity for a long time. Mm-hmm. All right? And that's just driven gross domestic product to the rich and away from workers. All right? And it's just made things harder and harder for people to survive.
They're not seeing that. Nostalgia, folks, has nothing to do with anything except, man, I miss the good old days. And so I had to create the price of the loaf of bread clock, just to ridicule this idea. And so I did it, Here's bread. Okay.
It's the slowest clock in the world.
But,
we go, get it in Times Square.
Yeah, you can. You can get it at Piccadilly Circus, too.
One cent.
At the time, the price of a loaf of bread in 1952 was 18 cents. Live in fear of the price of a loaf of bread.
That would be an improvement on the national debt. So.
Oh, yeah, it would. At least it would be fun to look at.
That was the MMT Podcast with Patricia Pino and Christian Riley. You can become a supporter of our work by going to patreon.com/MMT Podcast. Get in touch with us on Twitter at MMT Podcast, or I'm at Christ Riley, spelled ChristReilly. And Patricia is at Patricia N. Pino, spelled PATRICIANPINO. You can also email me at christriley@outlook.com. Thanks for listening, and we hope to hear from you.
You're having fun, aren't you?
Yeah.
You're having fun with it.